A woman with no friends. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you a story. There was once a woman, brilliant, capable, deeply driven. She showed up early, stayed late, checked every box. She climbed the ladder, hit the goals, got the promotion. On paper, she was thriving, but when the celebrations ended, she went home, alone, no calls, no messages, no one to tell the good news to, no one to lean on when the nights got dark. You see, she wasn't unlikable. She wasn't mean, she was just invisible in a world that rewards performance over connection. Now here's what's fascinating. She didn't start out that way. She used to be fun. She used to laugh loud. She used to love deeply, but slowly, life taught her something else. Life taught her that vulnerability was risky, that asking for help was weakness, that emotions were distractions, so she stopped reaching out. She stopped letting people in, and we wonder why some of the strongest people seem so distant. This isn't just her story, it's a pattern. In our race to succeed, we forget to connect. We become professionals in business and amateurs in relationships. Success. We talk about it all the time. Set goals, chase dreams, hit targets. We glorify it. We build entire lives around it. But what we rarely talk about is the cost, and often that cost is connection. There's a woman who's done everything right. She's educated, competent, respected. She's built her career with precision. She's the one everyone turns to when something needs to get done. Promotions? She's earned them. Deadlines, she crushes them. On the outside, she is the very definition of success. But on the inside, she's lonely. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being around strangers. No, this is deeper. This is the kind of loneliness that sets in when you're surrounded by people, yet feel entirely unseen. When you can be celebrated for your work, but forgotten as a person. When your name is known, but your story isn't. And here's the strange thing, she didn't even notice it happening, not at first. Life got busy, work demanded more, friends drifted, texts went unanswered. Not out of rudeness, but out of exhaustion. Slowly, her world shrank. Not because she wasn't likable, not because she didn't care, but because in the pursuit of making it, she didn't realize she was letting go of the very thing that made life worth living: connection. This isn't just one woman's story. This is something we're seeing more and more, especially among high achievers. In the race to succeed, we forget to stay connected. We trade relationships for results. We choose deadlines over dinners, performance over presence. We convince ourselves that we'll circle back to the people in our lives later, when things slow down. But later never comes. And when we finally look up from the grind, we realize we're alone. Success without someone to share it with doesn't feel like success. It feels empty. It feels like arriving at the top of a mountain and realizing no one else is there. No cheers, no smiles, just silence. Because here's the thing, people don't just want to be admired. They want to be understood. They want to be seen, not for what they've achieved, but for who they are underneath it all. And when that part of us goes unnoticed, when our emotional needs are pushed aside in favor of productivity, we begin to feel like we don't matter. We often think the opposite of loneliness is company, but it's not. The opposite of loneliness is connection, real connection, the kind where someone looks at you and says, "I see you," not just what you do, you. That's why success, no matter how shiny it looks from the outside, will always fall short if it's not rooted in relationship. Accomplishments can impress, but they can't hold your hand when you're hurting. Awards can decorate your wall, but they can't listen to you when your voice is shaking. The truth is, we're wired for connection. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And when we build lives that look perfect on the outside but feel empty inside, we begin to break down. Not because we aren't strong, but because strength without support is exhausting. So yes, be ambitious, chase the dream, but don't lose the people who remind you why you started. Don't sacrifice connection on the altar of success. Because in the end, the moments that matter most won't be the ones you spent winning alone. They'll be the ones you shared with someone who truly saw you. And that is real success. She walks into a room quietly, not because she has nothing to say, but because she's learned that saying too much often leads to being misunderstood. She smiles politely, nods at the right moments, and listens more than she speaks. On the surface, she's reserved, maybe even distant, but that's not the whole truth. The truth is, she's not cold, she's not unlikable, she's not disconnected because she doesn't want connection. She's disconnected because at some point in her life, she learned that being too open came with consequences, that showing emotion was risky, that letting people in often led to them walking out. It's easy to look at someone like her and assume she chooses solitude. But more often than not, solitude is something she's learned to live with, not something she ever asked for. People become invisible not because they're unworthy, but because they've been misunderstood. They've been labeled too intense, too sensitive, too quiet, too much or not enough, and over time those labels stick. They begin to shrink themselves. They begin to silence the parts of them that once reached out, that once loved loudly, that once believed others would stay. We don't always recognize these people because they're often high functioning, they show up, they do what's expected. They make it easy for us not to worry about them. But beneath the surface, they carry stories they've never told. Moments of rejection, times they felt small, memories of reaching out and being left hanging. Here's what's really going on. It's not that they don't want connection. It's that connection has become something fragile to them, something that doesn't feel safe. So they protect themselves, they keep conversations light, they steer clear of topics that matter, and slowly they fade, not from life, but from the emotional radar of those around them. It's important to understand that many of the people we call loners or independent aren't that way by nature, they're that way by necessity. Somewhere along the way, their openness was met with indifference, or worse, with judgment, so they withdrew, not all at once, but gradually, a little less sharing here, a little less vulnerability there. Until one day, connection feels like a foreign language. The world is quick to judge what it doesn't understand, and we often assume that people who are alone must be doing something wrong. But the truth is far more nuanced. People disconnect because they've been hurt. They've been unseen for too long. They've been in rooms full of people, but still felt isolated. We need to change how we approach people like this. We need to stop expecting them to make the first move, to prove they're worthy of our time. Instead, we need to notice them, not just their work, not just their talent, but them, their silence, their hesitations, the moments when their eyes say something their mouth won't. What they need isn't fixing. They're not broken. What they need is understanding, a soft place to land, a person who doesn't rush them or interrogate them, but simply stays, because once someone has been misunderstood enough times, they stop trying to explain. And the longer they go without being truly seen, the harder it becomes to believe that anyone ever will. But it's never too late. One person's kindness, one person's patience, one person's willingness to go slow and stay present, that can begin to undo years of quiet hurt. So before you assume someone doesn't want friends, ask yourself, have they been given a reason to believe that friendship is safe? Have they ever been truly deeply understood? Because being misunderstood isn't about being wrong, it's about not being seen. And when we finally see someone for who they are, not who we assume they are, that's where real connection begins. From the time we're young, we're taught to be strong, don't cry, toughen up, keep going. Especially for women in high-achieving environments, strength becomes a kind of armor. They learn early on that to be taken seriously, they must be composed, controlled, and never ask for help. It starts with subtle messages, praise for doing it all alone, admiration for holding it together under pressure, even applause for not needing anyone. Over time, this becomes the blueprint for how many women show up in the world, competent, resilient, and emotionally self-contained. But here's the catch. While society trains us to be strong, it does not teach us how to receive support. In fact, it often shames us for needing it. So we learn to suppress our emotional needs. We learn to suffer quietly. We become fluent in independence and strangers to vulnerability. The result, a growing number of women are burning out, not because they aren't capable, but because they are carrying far more than anyone realizes, all on their own. They're praised for being the rock, the one who holds everyone else together, but no one stops to ask, who holds her? It's not that these women don't want support. It's that they've been conditioned to believe they shouldn't need it. That if they admit they're struggling, it will somehow invalidate all the hard work they've done to be seen as strong. So instead of asking for help, they push through. Instead of sharing how they feel, they smile and say, "I'm fine." They keep going because they don't know how, or if they're even allowed, to stop. There's a dangerous assumption in our culture that needing support is a weakness, but nothing could be further from the truth. Needing support is human, and asking for it takes more courage than pretending you're okay. When someone reaches out and says, "I'm not doing well," that's not a breakdown, that's bravery. That's a person choosing connection over isolation. That's someone saying, "I want to be seen." But when the message we send to high, functioning, forming people is "you're strong, you've got this," we accidentally tell them they're not allowed to need anyone. We box them into a role they didn't choose, a role where their strength is their prison. Think about it. How many women in your life seem like they have it all together? How many always show up, always deliver, always take care of others? Now ask yourself, how often do you check in with her? How often do you say, "Hey, you don't have to be strong right now. You can just be"? Because the truth is, people don't break because they're weak. They break because they've been strong for too long without support. And the irony, when you do give these women space to be vulnerable, when you let them know they're allowed to be human, you don't weaken them. You empower them, you give them room to breathe, you help them remember that being strong and needing help are not opposites. They can coexist. It's time to shift the narrative. Strength is not about silence. It's not about stoicism. Real strength is about knowing your limits, honoring your needs, and having the courage to ask for help without shame. We don't need more people who are perfect. We need more people who are real. Who can say, "I'm strong, but I'm also tired, I'm capable, but I still need care, I'm independent, but I'm not invincible." Because when we create a world where support is not a sign of weakness, but a mark of wisdom, we all become stronger together. And no one has to carry the weight of being strong alone ever again. Friendship is often misunderstood. We think it's about shared interests, matching energy, or always having the right words to say. But true friendship, real, meaningful, lasting connection, is far simpler and far more powerful than that. It's about presence. There's a woman who's been through more than most people realize. She's had her share of disappointments, of moments where the ground gave way beneath her feet. She's known silence when she needed words. She's known distance when she needed closeness. And somewhere along the way, she stopped expecting people to stay, because so many didn't. She learned that people show up for the good times, the celebrations, the successes, the victories. But when things got messy, when she wasn't easy to be around, when she needed to be picked up off the floor, not congratulated on a win, those were the moments when people quietly disappeared. And so, she stopped letting people get close. This is what we do, isn't it? We retreat. We stop reaching out. We tell ourselves we're too much or too complicated. We start believing that our mess scares people away, that friendship is conditional, that we're only worthy of love when we're convenient to love. But here's the truth. Friendship isn't about fixing people. It's about staying when there's nothing to fix, just feelings to hold. The best kind of friend isn't the one who shows up with answers. It's the one who shows up and stays, even when they don't know what to say, even when your story makes them uncomfortable, even when they can't relate to what you're going through. They don't try to change the subject. They don't try to fix the pain. They just sit beside you in it, because presence is more powerful than solutions. We often think we need to have the right advice, the perfect words, or some grand gesture to make someone feel supported. But what we need more than anything is someone who chooses to stay. Someone who says, "I don't know what to do, but I'm not leaving." That kind of loyalty, that kind of quiet, consistent presence, it's rare. And when you find it, it changes you. It tells you that you're not too much, that your pain is not a burden, that you don't have to hide the parts of you that feel broken. Because real friends don't flinch at your darkness. They sit with you in it until the light comes back. And if you've never experienced that kind of friendship, it's easy to believe it doesn't exist, but it does. It just doesn't shout. It doesn't make a show of loyalty. It's the quiet voice that says, "I'm here," and keeps showing up to prove it. There's a kind of healing that only happens in the presence of someone who refuses to walk away. It doesn't require deep conversation. Sometimes it's just sitting on the other end of the phone, listening. Sometimes it's showing up with food or sending a message that says, "You don't have to go through this alone." And if you are the one who always stays, don't ever think that your presence isn't enough. You don't need to solve their problems. You don't need to rescue them. Your presence is the rescue, because true friendship isn't about doing the heroic thing. It's about doing the consistent thing. It's about being the person who stays when everyone else would have left, and in a world full of people who run when things get hard, be the one who sits down and says, "Take your time, I'm not going anywhere." We often assume people will speak up when they need help, that they'll let us know when they're struggling, that if they're feeling alone, they'll say something. But the reality is very different. The people who need us the most are often the ones who say the least. There's a woman you know, she seems fine. Maybe she's quiet, maybe she's always busy. Maybe she always says, "I'm good, just tired." And maybe you believe her, after all, she's functioning. She's showing up. She's keeping it together. But what you don't see is what's happening beneath the surface. She's not fine. She's lonely. She's emotionally exhausted. She's questioning her place in the world. She goes home to silence and wakes up to the same routine on autopilot. Her life is full of tasks, but empty of true connection. She's not reaching out, not because she doesn't want to, but because she's convinced no one will reach back. We often underestimate the quiet ones. We assume they're content in their solitude, but the truth is many of them are silently waiting for someone to notice, someone to care, someone to ask not just "How are you?" but "How are you really?" And that's all it takes. One person to notice, one person to make the first move, one person to say, "You don't seem like yourself lately, talk to me." Connection doesn't require grand gestures. It begins with intention. It begins with seeing people, not just their roles or responsibilities, but them. It means looking past the surface and asking, is there more going on here than they're letting on? We live in a world that moves fast. We scroll, we skim, we multitask. But connection happens in slowness, in pausing long enough to really see someone, to check in not because we have to, but because we want to. That check-in might be the only moment of human warmth they feel that day. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't need all the right words. You just need to care enough to ask, because sometimes people don't open up until they feel safe, and safety doesn't come from being told to talk. It comes from knowing someone genuinely wants to listen. And what happens when you do reach out? Often something remarkable. People soften, they exhale, they let the guard down a little, maybe not all at once, but piece by piece. They begin to feel seen again. And once we feel seen, we begin to believe that we matter. That's the power you hold. Not in fixing someone's problems, but in reminding them they're not invisible, that someone notices, that someone cares. And in a world where people are praised for being strong, being the person who offers softness is a quiet act of rebellion and a profound act of love. So if someone comes to your mind, text them, call them. Show up, don't wait for them to say, "I'm struggling." Most won't, not because they don't trust you, but because they've learned to carry it all alone. Be the person who sees them before they say a word. Be the one who reminds them they don't have to be okay to be loved, that they don't have to impress you to be worth your time, that they don't have to ask for help to receive it. Because maybe, just maybe, the greatest gift we can give each other is the kind of presence that says, "You don't have to go through this by yourself. I'm here, I see you, and I'm staying." There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, it comes from isolation. A woman sits with that silence every day. She scrolls past smiling faces and laughter, filled captions, wondering if something's wrong with her. Why does it feel like everyone else belongs somewhere, and she doesn't? She doesn't have friends, not because she doesn't want them, but because somewhere along the way the connections never lasted. People came and went. Maybe she was too honest, too emotional, too intense. Or maybe she was just herself, and somehow that never felt like it was enough. She's been told in subtle ways that she's too much, too quiet, too loud, too soft, too strong, too ambitious, too emotional. People like her get edited in conversations, smiled at politely, but never truly invited in. And after enough times being misunderstood, overlooked, or excluded, she started to believe the lie that maybe she just doesn't fit. But here's the truth: she is not too much, she is not broken, and she is certainly not alone. So many women carry this quiet ache, this feeling that they don't quite belong. They see friendships forming around them, yet they feel like they're watching from behind a glass wall. They smile, but deep down they're wondering, why not me? We live in a culture that celebrates extroversion and instant connection, but not everyone bonds that way. Some people take time, some people lead with depth, not small talk. Some people are waiting for someone who will stay long enough to understand them. If you're the woman with no friends, please know, you are not invisible, you are not forgotten, you are not weird for wanting deep, real, soulful connection. You just haven't found your people yet. There's nothing wrong with needing to be seen for who you really are. There's nothing wrong with craving friendships where silence is comfortable and words are safe. You don't need to shrink yourself to be likable. You don't need to be less of anything to be loved. And more importantly, you are not alone in feeling alone. There are countless women who feel the same way you do. Women who smile in public and cry in private. Women who feel surrounded by people but still feel completely isolated. Women who are tired of surface-level conversations and long for something real. But here's the hope: you don't need a crowd. You need one or two people who truly get you, who ask how you're really doing and actually want to hear the answer, who don't need you to perform or pretend, who see the unfiltered version of you and stay. Those people exist, but sometimes they take time to find. Sometimes it requires patience. Sometimes it means being brave enough to show up as yourself, even if it feels risky, because the right people don't flinch when you're vulnerable. They lean in. And if you're reading this, maybe it's time to stop wondering what's wrong with you and start honoring what's right with you, your depth, your sensitivity, your need for real connection. Those aren't flaws, those are your superpowers. The world doesn't need you to be louder or cooler or more social. The world needs you to be you. Because when you show up as your authentic self, you create space for others to do the same. And little by little, the walls come down. So if you've been feeling like the woman with no friends, know this: your story isn't over. You are not too much, you are enough, and you are not alone, no matter how alone it feels.